urge you to come back. And if you haven't seen our exhibit halls, please come see our exhibit halls. They're wonderful. The quilt exhibit will only be on display through the end of this month. And just want to tell you a couple things that are coming up. This Thursday is the ribbon cutting for the first phase of the Anne Pamela Cunningham's Rosemont exhibit. And we will have people here from the Mount Vernon Ladies Association here to speak at 2 o'clock. And afterwards we will be having Anne Pamela's 208th birthday celebration with some cupcakes. So come if you can for that. Of course, the exhibit will be open all day and then afterwards, and then it will grow because, again, this is the first phase of it. On Saturday, we will have the quilt that Andrew Johnson, who later became president, and a young lady who lived right down the street from us, Sarah Word, the quilt that they made together. Her mother, if you don't know this story, her mother squelched their romance. They wanted to get married, but she told her daughter, under no circumstances would she allow that to happen. That man will never amount to anything. So, anyway, bad advice, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was a safe thing. But anyway, we are happy to have you all come back. There's lots of things happening at the museum. Check our website, our Facebook page, and if you have Twitter and all that stuff, check that out too. Before I turn it over to Durant, I want to turn it over to Ernie Seegers, who is the chair of the Lawrence County 250th Committee.
Good afternoon. I'm here representing the Lawrence County Revolutionary War 250 Committee. Mr. Ashmore is a member of our committee, and we have our task to kind of coordinate and help the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. As part of that, the Lawrence County 250 Committee, the State 250 Commission, and the Chamber of Commerce here in Lawrence sponsored an essay contest about for middle school students and others dealing with the American Revolution. And we're pleased to have tonight our second place winner in that contest, Winter Young. Winter wrote a very good essay about James Wyndham, my fault. James Wyndham, who was a very important patriot commander during the Revolution. I think Durant will talk about him a little bit tonight in his presentation. But this is Winter. She is currently a freshman in high school, and I want to present her a check and thank her for her participation and congratulate her on what she's done. Real quick plug, our committee is working with school districts in both Lawrence and Clinton and Durant County on program dealing with the Revolution. We feel that's an important task what we're trying to do. I appreciate her coming, and thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Ernie, and thank you so much. We really appreciate the work that you did.
The first place winner is here too. The first place winner is here too.
Do what?
The first
Oh, is she?
place.
Okay. This is Malik Curry. He's the first person.
We appreciate you coming, Lee, and we appreciate you coming as well. Tonight we're going to be talking quite a bit about Lawrence County itself, and the individuals who lived here. And these individuals, you know that they would have been the greatest people in the world. They would have been good friends of ours. But they were divided in their loyalties during the American Revolution. And they were bitterly divided. So, it's shocking and it's striking what happened here in Lawrence County. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that tonight. This is a quote from a letter that Nathaniel Greene wrote on January the 10th, 1781. And I have read this quote 10 times, and I just glossed right over it. But preparing for this lecture tonight, I came across this quote again, and this is something that really came home. He's writing this to Alexander Hamilton. This is 11 days after Hammond's old story, which is an important part of our story. And it's 7 days before Cowpens. And what Nathaniel Greene says is, the division among the people is much greater than I imagined. Me too. And the Whigs and Tories persecute each other with little less than savage fury. There is nothing but murders and devastations in every quarter. So, it was so bad that towards the middle of the war, the Tories were driven out. Now, this is a picture I found when I was, surfing the internet. This is actually a picture of Tories in New York being driven into Canada. But this exact same thing happened here in Lawrence County. So you can see the hatred of the neighbors in the background running this poor family of Tories out of their possessions. In looking at the battles that the Little River regiments fought, and I'm talking about Little River Patriot regiments and Little River Loyalist regiments. Neighbors signing up, fighting regiments for shooting and killing each other. That's exactly what they were doing. There were 11 battles where the Little River Patriot Regiment fought directly against the Little River Patriot Regiment. Now, in these battles, these weren't just the Little River regiments versus each other. There were associated allies with these regiments in every case. But in these 11 battles, you can be assured that it was patriot or neighbor fighting against neighbor. And my laser pointer doesn't work. So I'm going to go over these battles, and that's what we're going to be discussing this evening. Kings Mountain, and how important that was. Musgrove Mills, turning point in the American Revolution, and I perfectly believe that. Great Canebrake is the battle that won the Snow Campaign. Fort Ridgeway, Fort Lincoln, Hammond's Old Store, after wrestling. Hammond's Old Store, Hay Station, Fort Williams. This is the home place of James Williams. Right here, he had a plantation called Mount Pleasant. It was on Mudlick Creek, where the Lawrence County and Newberry County joined together. The first siege of 96, the second siege of 96, Kettle Creek down in Georgia. These are Little River regiments fighting against each other. But they weren't always fighting. There is a point in the war, very early in the war, at the beginning of the war, when things were heating up, and it was coming to a head in '96. Lawrence County Colonel Patrick Cunningham steals shot and powder from a wagon train that's being sent to the Cherokees. The Council of Safety in Charleston, Patriot, they wanted to gather the support of the Cherokees, and so they sent them shot and powder. But Patrick Cunningham had different ideas, and he went and he captured that shot and powder. And that set in motion an entire chain of events. And part of that chain of events was the Lawrence County Loyalist Regiment was going to besiege or come to the support of Patrick Cunningham in '96. But the Little River Patriot Regiment was going down to besiege Patrick Cunningham. Both of these groups moving through the area. And they come to a well-known spot near present-day Croft Hill. And this is where water was bubbling up out of the ground. Cool, refreshing water at Liberty Springs. And what I'm describing here is the legend of Liberty Springs. We have this story from the early annals of the church, Liberty Springs Presbyterian Church. As these two armies were moving towards '96, all of a sudden they were afflicted with a foe much greater than either one of them could face. And that foe was smallpox. Both armies had smallpox. So they declared a truce. Testing. They declared a truce. And the agreement was, if you lay down your arms, you can enjoy the cooling succor of the water of Liberty Springs. And this was a peace agreement. You can see here, this fellow's got a red hat on. He's a Tory. Blue hat on down there. He's a patriot. They're camped on both sides, but they're able to enjoy themselves, relieve their suffering from smallpox in Liberty Springs. This is a sketch that was done by an artist who's going to be doing some work here at the museum. It's Jorge Rubio. And Jorge is a big asset that we got. We're going to be counting on him a lot for a number of our projects. So that's what happened in Liberty Springs as the two armies were coming down to the first siege of '96. And there was a 2-day siege there. There was a shootout. Several killed on each side. When the siege of '96 was lifted, Patrick Cunningham still had in his possession the shot and the gunpowder. So he kept that. And 200 of his closest followers went with him into the wildest area that they could possibly imagine. And that area is right here in southern Greenville County, about 5 miles from my house. It's in the Great Canebrake. They hid in a canebrake, which was something that the Cherokees had used for defensive purposes for centuries. So Patrick Cunningham and his 200 men were in the canebrake. In the meantime, an army of 4,500 men under Richard Richardson from Camden came onto the area to break the siege, and they were rounding up all the Loyalist supporters in the backcountry. And they had a plan. They found out that Patrick Cunningham was at the Great Canebrake. So on December 22nd, 1775, this is 7 months before the Declaration of Independence was signed, Richard Richardson sent a force of 1,300 men overnight through bitter cold to the canebrake, where the 200 men were surrounded almost. Shootout started. They started shooting at each other. A few were killed on each side. The Loyalists were surprised. They were surrounded. 130 of them surrendered. But 70 of them escaped. And those 70 went deeper into Cherokee territory. And where that Cherokee territory was where downtown Greenville is right now. That's where Richard Paris had his plantation. And the 70 men who escaped from the Battle of Great Canebrake went into the Cherokee Nation. And I'll be talking about these 70 men quite a bit, along with their leader, who at this time was a 19-year-old sergeant named David Fanning. That quelled Loyalist activity in the backcountry of South Carolina, here in Lawrence County, quelled it for 4 years. But that wasn't the end of the problems in the backcountry. Here you can see the grave of James Birmingham, the first South Carolinian to die in the American Revolution, and this was in '96. When the 70 men were in Cherokee territory, this is when the period arose when the Cherokees were on the warpath. So there's many a thought about who proposed that the Cherokees go on the warpath. Now some people say, well, they were going to go in anyway because of all the incursions, all the depredations that had been committed against them, all the land that had been stolen. There were Cherokees that were going to go on the warpath no matter what. And they could do that. There was no constraints against them doing that. There was no central government among the Cherokees. There was no central government among the settlers either. And the settlers could do whatever they wanted with very little worry about being censured or imprisoned or whatever for that. So it was wild back then. It was very wild. Many think that the British Indian agents fostered this Cherokee uprising. Now, John Stewart, he was in Pensacola at this point, and he did not want the Cherokees to go on the warpath because he knew what was going to happen. Once the fighting started, he did supply them from Pensacola as best he could. Alexander Cameron was the assistant Indian agent, and he had his plantation in Abbeville County, and he went into the Cherokee Nation. So quite a few people thought that Alexander Cameron was the one stirring up all the trouble. And they were going after Alexander Cameron big time. The Shawnees came down from the north, the Iroquois Confederation. They were planning to go on the warpath, and they were encouraging the Cherokees to. So these are the different explanations that we get for why and how the Cherokees went on the warpath in June of 1776. This is the time when the Hampton Massacre occurred on the Spartanburg-Greenville County border, where Wade Hampton's great-grandfather, Anthony Hampton, and 7 other members of his household were killed. The next day, Jacob Height and his family were killed. He was slowly killed. His 2 teenage daughters were never seen again. His wife lived for 3 or 4 weeks as a hostage. They did find her dead, naked body a couple of weeks later. Her dress was a valuable commodity and would not have been left on her. I can tell you other atrocities that were happening during this time. There were 61 settlers killed during this time. So, you got the Shawnees, you got the warmongering Cherokees, you got the Indian agents. These are the reasons were given. But I know that there's another group that was starting these Cherokee atrocities. And that group was the 70 men who escaped from the Battle of the Great Canebrake and went into Cherokee territory. And we know much of this from David Fanning, who was a leader in this movement, who wrote his autobiography. And he describes going to the Paris plantation and leaving from there to start these depredations and massacres all along the Cherokee territory border. At this time, Cherokee territory was Greenville, Anderson, Pickens, and Oconee counties. 61 settlers were killed. But that wasn't all. On July the 15th, 1776, 11 days after the Declaration, 102 Scofielites, that's European men dressed as Indians, 102 Scofielites and 88 Cherokees left from the Richard Paris plantation and came down into Lawrence County. Now, among this group was also a fellow named James Lindley. And James Lindley had been captured at the Battle of the Great Canebrake, and he was marched down to Charleston with his hands tied behind his back in 2 feet of snow. That's why it's called Snow Campaign. April comes around, and he and Richard Paris convinced the Charleston authorities that if they are let loose, they could deal with the Cherokees and calm everything down, and the people in Charleston let them go. And they came up into Andrew Williamson's camp and said, "Hey, we're here to help you with the Cherokees." And Andrew Williamson looked at them and said, "Thanks, but no thanks." And they went back into Cherokee territory. And James Lindley teamed up with David Fanning with these 102 Scofielites and 88 Cherokees, and they came into Lawrence County, and they attacked a fort at Fort Lindley. James Lindley is attacking his own home place. James Lindley was a justice of the peace. He was a loyalist. He was from North Carolina. He was rewarded with 200 acres. And on these 200 acres, there was an old fort that had been built during the French and Indian War. And that fort had been refortified and rebuilt. And this is where many of the settlers in the backcountry went, because the Cherokees are on the rampage. And there was 50 men, women and children in this fort. Now, the leader of the Little River Regiment during this time was Jonathan Downs. And Jonathan Downs had 150 men in the Little River Patriot Regiment. And one account says that the Fort Lindley was his headquarters. Another account says he showed up at Fort Lindley on the day of July the 15th on his way to join with Williamson so that they could go into the Cherokee territory. So it just happened to be 150 of the Little River Regiment at Fort Lindley. And at midnight, the attack began. The Scofielites and the Cherokees surrounded the fort. And a brisk occurred. So, experienced Indian fighters in the fort, what they knew was that if you charged the Cherokees, they retreated. That was their mode of combat, totally acceptable in their society. So they burst through the gates of the fort, 10 abreast, charged the Cherokees. The attack was broken, and the Patriots retreated, or the Loyalists retreated. But we know that David Fanning was there because he talked about it in his autobiography. And we also know that James Lindley was there, gave his parole in Charleston, saying he is laying down his arms. He would not fight against the Patriots. But now they find his horse with his saddlebags with his captain's commission in there for the Loyalist militia. And so we know that James Lindley was at Fort Lindley. These are Lawrence County people fighting against Lawrence County people. And there was Cherokees on the side of the Loyalists in the Battle of Fort Lindley. Can you imagine what would have happened if the Patriots had lost at Fort Lindley? Now, did they think they were going there just to massacre 50 women and children? Perhaps, and that would have happened. And what would have happened to the rest of the garrison if it had fallen? The Battle of Fort Lindley is very much overlooked by most historians. But as far as Lawrence County is concerned, I'm telling you folks, that has a great deal of significance. So, I've got a few more pictures to show you, and I'm going to be showing maps. This is where the Battle of the Canebrake occurred. This is Patriots Grove. These pecan trees are 145 years old. They were planted in 1876. And that's in southern Greenville County off of Hopkins Farm, if they all know the Hopkins Farm on Fort Shoals Road. This is Fort Lindley. This is the field in front of Fort Lindley. Fort Lindley was inside the tree line there. This is on Fort Lindley Road in southwestern Lawrence County, I suppose. Across this field is where the Cherokees attacked. The fort was inside the tree line there. 15 miles from here, 10 miles from here. We're in the middle of it, folks. So, as the war progressed, and again, the Loyalists had been basically run out of the area at this time. They went down to Florida. Some went up north and followed the British forces there. Others went into the Cherokee territory. This activity was quelled for years. December 30th, 1778, Savannah falls. And when Savannah fell, there was a resurgence of Loyalist activity. And there was a fellow named John Boyd who gathered Loyalist forces. He came down from North Carolina through the backcountry of South Carolina. He was going to cross the Savannah River and join up with the Loyalist forces who were in Augusta at that time. And as John Boyd's coming through, he collects an army of 600 or 700 men. Where are they coming from? The Loyalists had been run to ground for years. Now, some of them, had professed allegiance to the Patriot cause, and now that they thought that Britain was ascending, they're going to go back and they're going to be a Loyalist. Where those people from the Cherokee territory, who were in the Cherokee territory, who did they join up with? There's no record of this, but I have a feeling that the Loyalists who were in the Cherokee territory, they're hooked up with John Boyd. So John Boyd is moving on through down in to join with Augusta. Andrew Pickens is got his militia up, 270 men. He's also joined with Elijah Clark and John Dooley from Georgia. And they catch the Loyalist forces under John Boyd at Kettle Creek. And here Pickens charges with 270 men. And he had Dooley and Clark on the flanks. He charges uphill. He dislodges. He captures and kills half of that force. The rest of them run away. And it's a tremendous victory for Andrew Pickens and the backcountry 96 militia who was fighting with him. And coincidentally, during this time, at the Battle of Kettle Creek, our friend James Lindley gets captured. He had, in April of 1776, given his parole, saying he would never take up arms again. But we know he fought at Fort Lindley. And now, 18 months later, he's captured at Kettle Creek. He broke his parole. Sentence for that is death. He was tried. He was found guilty. He was hung. He was buried. And all of that happened at 96. just a little bit of example of how things start to be heating up. So this is what happened at Kettle Creek. And here's a little bit of the scene at Kettle Creek, because this reminds me of Kings Mountain, if you will. I mean, that was a similar situation where this battle occurred. This is a great battlefield. It's down in Georgia. It's right across the line, not far away at all. So, May the 12th, 1780, momentous day in South Carolina history. That's when Charleston falls. There are two periods in the American Revolution that is necessary to understand. And the first 5 years of the American Revolution was the American period. The second 5 years was the British period. The British period starts on May 12, 1780 when Charleston fell. And when Charleston fell, 95% of the state of South Carolina was under total British domination. This is the time the Patriots banded together to overthrow British. Testing. So, there was very little opposition after Charleston fell. But the points of opposition that did show up, Thomas Sumter was in the Catawba Indian Reservation. And he had a force of almost as many as 1,000 men. Francis Marion wasn't in the picture at this time. Francis Marion had a severely damaged, broken ankle, which put him out during the time that Charleston fell. Otherwise, he would have been captured then. But he hasn't entered the field yet. But another big, helpful area of opposition was from North Carolinians under the command of Charles McDowell, who came down into South Carolina. Charles McDowell's camp, that was a very important area of resistance to the British rule. And I'm going to be talking about activities from Charles McDowell's camp. I've actually got a talk in Spartanburg coming up, and we're going to take a tour of 5 battles in 4 days that Patriot forces from McDowell's camp pushed British lines back 40 miles. But what I do want you to know is this is where the Patriots from the Little River Regiment came and coalesced. They joined up. They were there under James Williams. James Williams was the colonel of the Little River Regiment at this time. And he was a very good leader of men. So, when this force pushed British lines back 40 miles, that got the attention of Patriots throughout the South, particularly the over mountain men with Isaac Shelby. And Isaac Shelby and his men came over to see what was going on. And while they were there, they learned of a British encampment at Musgrove Mill. So, they learned that there were 200 Loyalist militia, including militia from Lawrence County, David Fanning's 14 men of the Fanning's Loyalist militia. So David Fanning was at Musgrove Mill. And James Williams was 60 men, Isaac Shelby was 60 men, Elijah Clark was 60 men. They joined forces. They were going to go get those 200 Tories down at Musgrove Mill. They rode all night long, 40 miles. They got there at daybreak. And as soon as they got there, they realized that the British had been reinforced by an additional 300 men that night. So now they've got 200 tired men on worn-out horses facing 500 militiamen down below. And the Patriot forces set up an ambush. They sent a decoy under Captain Shadrach Inman. he drew the Tories to charge after him, and when they did, they ran right into that ambush, that volley that the Patriot Militia, Shelby, Clark, and Williams commanded. And that was a very overwhelming victory. 200 men thoroughly defeated 500. And what was so important is this is the time right after the Battle of Camden, which was the worst defeat in South Carolina history. Worse than the Battle of Charleston. This is the lowest point in Patriot forces was after the Battle of Camden. And 3 days after that, there was a battle of Fishing Creek where Thomas Sumter lost 300 out of the 700 he had. That was a terrible defeat. But on the day that happened, Musgrove Mill happened. And Musgrove Mill, I can easily make an argument, that was the turning point in the Patriot forces in the South. So Musgrove Mill is of extreme importance, and that was Little River Loyalists versus Little River Patriots. This is where the field was where Charles McDowell's camp was. This is at Earl's Ford, North and South Carolina border. I'm going to take a field trip there in a couple of weeks. I'd love for y'all to join me. This was an important site right here. This is the field at Musgrove Mill, and you can see the ambush was in the tree line. As the Royalist militia charged forward, they were met with that devastating volley. After Musgrove Mill, Pat Ferguson and Cornwallis,
They wanted to do something about that.
they didn't want to let Musgrove Mill stand, so this is when they sent Patrick Ferguson after the Over Mountain men. And so as a result of this, that Kings Mountain occurred. And Kings Mountain, we've got Virginians here, Tennesseans, North Carolinians, South Carolinians right here. 25% of the force at Kings Mountain were from South Carolina. This is where James Williams commanded the militia wing from South Carolina there. So he was a very capable officer. Unfortunately, James Williams was killed at Kings Mountain. He was the last Patriot casualty. He was shot in the head, and the next day, as they were leaving from Kings Mountain, he died in the arms of his 17-year-old son, Captain Daniel Williams. So at Kings Mountain, you had the Spartan Regiment, you had the 2nd Spartan Regiment, you had the New Acquisition Regiment, you had the Little River District Regiment, you had the Lower 96th District, that's Newberry, you had the 96th District, that's Abbeville and Edgeville, McCormick, those counties. Fighting against the Spartan Loyalist Regiment, the Little River Loyalist Regiment, the 96th Loyalist Regiment, neighbor fighting against neighbor here at Kings Mountain. So that was a very bitter and bloody fight. We talk about Tarleton's Quarter at the Battle of the Waxhaws, where Tarleton's men just slaughtered surrendering patriots outright. That didn't happen. There were 5 killed after the white flag was killed. But the word got out that bloody Tarleton gets no quarter. The same order went out amongst the patriots at Kings Mountain. There were 100 men killed after the white flag. However, when was the white flag raised? And some people put their arms down. They saw other fighting going on. They picked their arms up. Well, did they surrender? I don't know. But there were 100 killed at the end of that battle. 600 or 700 prisoners captured. The prisoners forced to take their shoes off and he carried 2 muskets apiece with the firelocks removed, and marched towards the prison camps in Virginia. It was a rough, brutal march. If somebody lagged behind, they got whacked across the back of the sword. If the doctors tried to treat the wounded, they got whacked across the head with a sword. A week after the battle, 9 of the loyalist leaders at Kings Mountain were hung after a kangaroo court. It was brutal, that march after Kings Mountain for the loyalists. But now, there were 900 patriots to begin with, 25% of them in South Carolina. They didn't go on that march. And the North Carolinians, as they got home, they went home. And over mountain men went over home. Nobody was left to guard the prisoners. Seriously, those prisoners escaped. 600 prisoners escaped. And where did they go? They went back to 96, where they started from. So, that was the Battle of Kings Mountain. Now, the next big battle was Cowpens. But there were 2 very significant battles that occurred between Kings Mountain and Cowpens. And one of those battles was Blackstock's, November 20th, 1780. This was a great victory, Sumter's greatest victory over Banastre Tarleton. Tarleton had 270 men. He had 92 of them killed after that battle and 100 wounded. And Sumter lost 4 men. So that was a big Patriot victory. But then after Blackstock's, the Georgians went home. Sumter and his men went back to Catawba Indian Reservation. There's a void in the country. And you've got all these Tories now down in 96. And with the void in the backcountry, they send 250 of these Tories right through here on their way to Creek Presbyterian Church into Union County along Air Force Creek. And they're plundering as they're going. And this is in December of 1780. And during this time, Nathaniel Greene is coming down, the 3rd Continental Army, and this time George Washington sends his very best, and there ain't no better than Nathaniel Greene. The Greene divides his force. He sends Morgan to 1,000 men to the Packlet River to Grendel Shoals. And then he sends the best cavalryman in America, William Washington, through the same area, through the Fair Forest area. William Washington observes the plundering that had gone on with this 250 band of Tories. And he says the destruction and the plunder of the inhabitants begs for redress. And he reported this to Daniel Morgan 2 days after Christmas. And Daniel Morgan says, redress away. And William Washington starts to chase after these Tories. The Tories know that he's coming. So they start retreating. And they retreat 20 miles. And they retreat so far, they get into Laurens County. So, where they get to is right here. Hammond's old store. This is all the way to 96. Hammond's old store was the center of the community. It's 3 miles from Clinton, 10 or 12 miles from here. It was the only store in the Little River District. Now look, there were mills, there were commerce at the mills, and there were churches, there were gathering points. I have not seen a single other reference to a store. Hammond's store was the only store in the Little River District, and as such, it was the center of the community. That is where the individuals came to vote, for instance. That is where in the election of 1778, for the South Carolina State Senate. There were two individuals running for that state seat. And one of those individuals was James Williams. He was running to be senator. He was successful at Musgrove Mill. Well, this is actually before Musgrove Mill happened. This is 1778. Who's he running against? James Williams, the most ardent patriot in the county. He's running against the most ardent loyalist in the county, and that is none other than Robert Cunningham. Robert Cunningham was the leader of the loyalist forces here in the Little River District. And his brother, Patrick Cunningham, was just as ardent a loyalist as Robert was. And these men got in a debate at Hammond's old store. It was that old-timey stump debate. But it got so heated and I'm upset that those two gentlemen got in a fist fight as they were trying to get for votes. And Robert Cunningham won. And when the votes came in, Robert Cunningham, the loyalist, was elected to the South Carolina State Senate, which was totally patriot at that time. Now, he never served because he refused to sign an oath of loyalty. But that shows how divided the population was here. The population here in 1778 elected the leading loyalist. But also what happened in 1778 was the Confiscation Act of 1778. And the General Assembly passed a law that said if you had taken up arms for the loyalist cause, you had 60 days to vacate your premises. If you could sell. And some folks had friends who were patriots who would buy their place and maybe give them a fair price for it. But it was firehouse sales for sure, because they were under the gun. And if they did not sell in that 60 days, their land was confiscated and then sold at auction. So these men were driven out. Most of them went down to Florida. And they joined forces down in Florida. They were very effective rangers. So, if you took up arms, if you wrote a letter to Cornwallis congratulating him, if you did this, if you did that, there was 5 categories that you could have all of your possessions confiscated under. But just in case, they added a 6th category. And that category was in case you were an obnoxious person. You'd be confiscated then. So, just give you a little bit of the level of antagonism that was going on through there. And so now we have these 250 loyalists who are being chased by William Washington, and they're camped at Hammond's old store, 3 miles from Clinton, right down there. And they're taking it easy. Well, what they did not account for was William Washington covered 40 miles during this time. And when William Washington left Packlet River with his 80 Continental Light Dragoons, and I'm telling you, these are the best cavalry force we had in America. Now, Light Horse Larry Lee is on the same level with William Washington. But this is the best of the best, these 80 men. But in addition to them, they had 200 mounted riflemen. They had the Little River Regiment under Joseph Hayes. They had the 2nd Spartan Regiment under Thomas Brandon, one hell of a fighting man. And they had the lower 96th District under Samuel Hammond, 24-year-old major. And he's one of the most distinctive people that South Carolina has ever produced. These 200 men Newberry County, Lawrence County, Spartanburg, and Union County are with William Washington. And when they crest the hill overlooking the Bush River, this is the Bush River right here, and it's a little creek there, easily fordable. That's why this road is here. This is the 96 road. This is the road from 96 to Philadelphia. This is the way you went. This road is still here today. This battlefield is still here today. This battlefield is one of the newest battlefields discovered in the state of South Carolina. It's newest in America. About 4 years ago, we didn't even know where this battlefield was. We knew about where it was. But the Paynes gave us permission to search their property, and we found the battlefield. And I'm going to show you that on the next slide. But for here, you have William Washington and his 80 light dragoons coming in column line, breaking down on Ashmore line. The Tories were, I did this before the archaeological work came in. We know that the store was about right here. And this is where the Tories were, all in through this area. Now you see these little dots that I'm showing here? Those are dead Tories, folks. Seriously, of the 250 loyalists that were there, 150 of them were killed or wounded. 40 were captured, 60 fought in a battle the next day. So there were 0 Patriot casualties. This was a slaughter. This was a massacre. It was a slaughter. A massacre is a killing of innocent persons. A slaughter is a mass killing of armed individuals. Patrick Cunningham was at this battle, the leader of the Little River Loyalist Militia. His cousin, William Cunningham, was at this battle. Patrick and William Cunningham were both at Kings Mountain. They saw 100 of their comrades killed after the white flag at Kings Mountain. Now they're here at Hammond's old store, and they see 150 out of 250 killed or wounded for the capture. One account says that Bloody Bill Cunningham, William Cunningham, ran a horse to death escaping from this battle. But that was written to protect the fact. We really don't know. So, this is part of one of the greatest feuds that's ever been in South Carolina, for sure, and really one of the greatest feuds that's ever been in America. And this is the Williams-Cunningham feud. We talked about James Williams and Robert Cunningham getting in a fist fight at Hammond's old store. They fought in battle. The Williams and the Cunninghams fought in battle after battle. James Williams killed at Kings Mountain, but his 17-year-old son, Captain Daniel Williams, continues to fight with the Little River Regiment. He's here at Hammond's old store, which, by the way, his sister owns. Because James Williams bought Hammond's store in 1772. James Williams owned Hammond's old store. And when James Williams died at Kings Mountain, his daughter Mary was willed the store. So, this is just this is one episode in that feud. Just to show you, this shows the artifacts that we found at Hammond's old store. This road down here at the bottom is Green Plain Road, for those of you who know that area. That's Green Plain Road. This is where residence is. And this is where we found rifle balls, musket balls, buttons, buckles, all the elements that come with a Revolutionary War battlefield. We found that battlefield, folks. And this battlefield now is being, the South Carolina Battleground Trust owns 30 acres of it, and it's being developed into a riding and walking trail. This is going to be totally open to the public. It may be a year or so before, this is finally finished. But that's the Battle of Hammond's Old Store. Now, the next big battle was Cowpens, and there weren't any Royalist militia at Cowpens. Cowpens was the finest moment of the Little River Patriot militia. Absolute heroes. All of these militiamen that fought at Hammond's Old Store, now they're fighting at Cowpens. But there's no Loyalist militia there. Why is that? Because they all got killed at Hammond's Old Store. And the ones that didn't get killed were so fed up with fighting for the Loyalists, they didn't show up at Cowpens. But at Cowpens, the Patriots had a 1,000-man advantage due to what happened here at Hammond's Old Store. So after Cowpens, race to the Dan, Guilford Courthouse, Cornwallis retreats to Wilmington. Greene starts to follow him. But when Greene is sure that Cornwallis is going to Wilmington, Greene takes a sharp right turn and comes back into South Carolina. And where he comes into is Camden. And he has a battle at Hawkers Hill, which he lost, but the British had to retreat after that battle. Strategic victory. Next on Greene's list is 96. And so Greene comes to, what happened there? To 96. And there's 96. This was about a 3-week siege with the people who would survive Kings Mountain and who would survive Hammond's Store, the Loyalists. Now they're at 96. And this is a siege. And Lord Rawdon comes from Charleston. He brings a 2,000-man army. And Greene has to retreat because he can't fight off both forces. So he retreats. But this is another standoff that was between Little River Patriot Regiment and Little River Loyalist Regiment. So, after Greene retreats from 96, and where does he go? He goes to Fort Williams. The Continental Army was stationed in Lawrence County for two days. Rawdon, though, in 96, he knows that he cannot hold the back country of South Carolina, so he's going to retreat from 96. And he sends out word to all the Loyalists in the back country, all of them, come on into 96, we're retreating, we're going to go down to Charleston. And they go to Charleston and they remain as refugees for the next 18 months. So Rawdon is in 96 for a month, bringing these folks in. It is the summertime of 1780, 81, and it's just hot, hot, hot. That march down to Charleston was worse than the siege was. There were more deaths on that march than there were. But not everybody went down to Charleston. And one fella who did go down was a fella named William Cunningham. a band of 60 cutthroats, and he took them to a camp on Cane Creek in present-day Oconee County. I've been to Cane Creek on present-day Oconee. I've been to Cane Creek Court in Oconee County. And you go there, and it's peninsula surrounded by Lake Keowee. And if there's not $5 million house after $5 million house after $5 million house on Cane Creek Court, I don't know what a $5 million house looks like, which I probably know anyway. But just being there and seeing all that opulence and thinking this is where Bloody Bill Cunningham lit out for 2 months. It was a juxtaposition, I don't mind telling you that. But anyway, while he was there, William Cunningham, Bloody Bill Cunningham, was raiding the back country. And one of the places he raided was a fort on the Reedy River. And this is a Fort Ridgeway, which was the home place of Captain John. And on September the 3rd, 1781, William Cunningham killed the 8-man squad that was there at Fort Ridgeway. And we know this because the Charleston paper and the Savannah paper, a couple of weeks later, both published one paragraph saying that William Cunningham had killed 8 rebels at Fort Ridgeway. And that was here in Lawrence County. And was that the start of the activity that William Cunningham, Bloody Bill Cunningham, was going to continue with over the next couple of months? The answer is yes. That's where it started, at Fort Ridgeway. And this is typical of what Fort Ridgeway may have looked like. A home place with stout logs and a palisaded fence. This is what Fort Lindley looked like. This is what Fort Mont looked like, but the home was much nicer. So that's typical of a fort. So next we have one of the most gruesome events that ever happened in the history of South Carolina. And this was when the British were in Charleston as refugees. And this is a time 1 month after Yorktown, when people were celebrating. Peace at last. We beat the British. Joseph Hayes, the colonel of the Little River Red, was at his home place, which is in between Fort Williams and Hammond's Old Store. Hayes Station is right here. This is on the 96 road. 96 is down here. There was a stagecoach station there, and Joseph Hayes was there November the 19th, 1781. Yorktown was October the 19th, 1781. So he's there with 25 men. And at this point, William Cunningham is on what is referred to as the Bloody Scout. And he leaves out from Charleston. And he runs against Captain Butler and Sterling Turner's command at a place called Clouds Creek in Lexington. And he brutally massacres those individuals, 27 of them. He chops them to pieces. He chops them to pieces while they're still alive. I'm not going to tell you everything he did. I mean, it was grotesque. The next day in Newberry County, he killed 6 men, again in a most grotesque fashion. Now he comes up, he goes to Fort Williams first. And of course, it was abandoned, it was burned at that time. So then he attacks at Hayes Station, and he surrounds a blockhouse that Joseph Hayes had there. And there was a blacksmith shop. William Cunningham heated up and then threw it on the roof of the blockhouse, catching it on fire. Joseph Hayes sticks his head out the door and says, if we surrender, will you treat us as prisoners of war? And William Cunningham says, sure, come on out. So they came out one at a time, had their hands tied behind their back. When they're all tied like that, his 300 men surrounded this group of 25. And as was Bloody Bill's custom, he asked his men, is there anybody here who should be exonerated? Is there anybody here who should be let go? And there were several people there who were let go by their neighbors. Because again, these are Little River loyalists versus Little River patriots. And then he says to his men, is there anybody here you'd particularly like to kill right now? And I don't think anybody took him up on that particular offer on this day, but as soon as that little order of business was taken care of, Bloody Bill Cunningham put a noose around Daniel Williams' neck, son of James Williams, 18 years old, captain, puts a noose around Joseph Hayes' neck and hoists them up off the ground. And as they're struggling with their last breath, he takes a rifle and shoots them through the body. I'll let you decide what body part that was. So, as soon as those deaths occurred, he turned to the remaining survivors. He pulls his sword out. Now, there's one story that young Joseph Williams, Daniel Williams' younger son, 14 years old, is looking up at his brother as the noose is around his neck, and he says, oh brother, what should I tell our mother? And Bloody Bill turns to him and says, you'll tell her nothing, you damn rebel. Suckling, and he runs him right through right there. 14-year-old boy was the first death. 16-year-old Lieutenant John Neal was killed on that day, chopped to pieces. 18 men were chopped to pieces. And you couldn't tell whose head was on whose foot on whose head that day. And families of 4 of those men came and took the bodies home for a private burial. 14 of those men were buried in 2 common graves. This is Hayes Station. This is Lawrence County. This is 10 or 15 miles from here. This is Lawrence County neighbor versus neighbor. Now, Bloody Bill Cunningham was the greatest sociopath, psychotic killer that South Carolina has ever produced. And in this Bloody Scout, there was a total of 79 men killed throughout the state of South Carolina. Bloody Bill Cunningham had his home place plundered. His father, his elderly father, was beaten. His invalid brother was killed. And when Bloody Bill Cunningham got that message, when he was in Savannah, about January 1779, he stuck a pistol in his belt. And he walked 180 miles in 6 days. And he walked straight up to William Ratliff's home place. William Ratliff was the one who plundered. William Ritchie. There were plundering patriots as well. And William Ritchie was one of them. So, William Cunningham goes up to Ritchie's house. Ritchie's sitting at the table with his wife and his son right there. He grabs Ritchie by the scruff of his neck, pulls him out in the front yard, throws him down the ground, and shoots him dead right there in front of the wife and the son. And this is the first death that we know that's attributed to William Cunningham, but it was not the last. So, yes, he was on a revenge mission, but you don't have to be absolutely psychotic with how you carry out your revenge. So that is the story of Bloody Bill Cunningham. He died 6 years later. Now, and he went to the Bahamas to stay with his cousin, Robert Cunningham, who received a pension for all his life. And I read one story, it's unsubstantiated, but one story says that he was poisoned. And then along with that, it says that he died of syphilis. Again, that's unsubstantiated. All we know, there was a report in the Charleston paper that Buddy Bill Cunningham, William Cunningham, had died and was buried in the Bahamas. So that's the end of his story.
Folks,
I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and I appreciate y'all sticking with me on this. You know, I do have some slides on Fort Williams. I want you to know about Fort Williams in Lawrence County. Fort Williams has a distinction that no place in America has. It changed hands 6 times during the Revolutionary War. And I have an accounting here of the times that Fort Williams did turn over. And Buddy Bill Cunningham's raid is one of these times. But I want you to know that that is another example of the fighting and the turmoil. I mean, the state of South Carolina turned over 3 times. That's tough. Because when an area turns over, you're either absolutely plundered or you're absolutely foraged. But either way, you lose everything. The difference is with foraging, you get a little piece of paper. Say, we'll pay you back later. But it was brutal back there, folks. I think I've given some sense of just how bad it was. One minor bright spot is the story of Anne Pamela Cunningham, who is the granddaughter of Patrick Cunningham. I've been talking about the Cunninghams. Patrick Cunningham, Colonel Cunningham, stole shot and powder, fought in battle after battle. He was allowed to re-enter and come back into Lawrence County. He was immersed. He was fined 12% of his holdings. But in 1788, 10 years or so after the war, he was elected to the state senate. And he served for a term. But that's the honor that he was one of the leading loyalists in Lawrence County, was elected to the South Carolina State Senate. At this point, does anybody have any questions? Yes, now Stage Station is open. 455 Williams Road. You're welcome to go there. We have, with the 250 committee, to Ernie's hard work and other things that we have done, we were able to purchase 1.29 acres there at the entrance to Page Station. And it is a really attractive Revolutionary War park that's under development right now. Now, you can drive there. It's gated. There's a 200-yard wall behind the gate. It's open, but we have to have that gate there because that site has been abused in the past. Trash and drugs and you name it, it's been up there. But we've got that under control now. One reason is because of that gate there. But you can park there. You can walk to the site, 455 Williams Road. And Raphael, I may have to take you there. Well, you missed it. If you're not paying attention, you just lost money. There's no telling what you lose if you don't pay attention.
Do you know where Fort Williams is?
Good question. I appreciate that. I was going to get there. We are trying to find Fort Williams. We know where it's not. There's about a 200 or 300 acre tract right there that the private landowner will not let us search.
Is it a corporate or a
It's individual under a corporate name. I know the folks well. I grew up with them. Yes. Very much so. They definitely switched sides. For one, during the Cherokee War of 1776, there were a lot of loyalists who were just very happy about the annihilation of the Cherokee territory. And they joined up for that. I can't remember. Alexander Chesney, for instance, fought for both the Patriots and the Loyalists. And certainly they changed. And these folks who stayed after the conversation after 1777, 1778, they had to sign a paper, they had to sign an allegiance, but either that or lose their property. Now, the British are resurgent. Oh, thank goodness. I was with you guys all along. That stuff definitely happened. Yes. Right. There were a lot of youngsters that fought, and our best recollections of the American Revolution come from these 16 and 17-year-olds who 50 years later filled out pension applications describing what they had done so that they could, collect the pension in their latter years. Well, folks, I guess we're going to wrap it up right now. But I appreciate y'all's attention and appreciate y'all